Hello, colleagues. This is Stephanie Holmes. We are going to conduct a virtual training session today with our focus on the importance of implementing multimedia performance-based tasks to foster creativity and innovation. So, media literacy. It has increased tremendously over the years due to advances in technology and the development and ultimately the adoption of the standards from the International Society for Technology in Education and the ever expanding product line of the Internet of Things. Everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. They have a computer strapped to their wrist, tablet, laptops, iPads, iPods. Everywhere you look, someone has some type of tech device. Our coffee makers, our HVAC, our doorbells. There's so many things that are connected to the internet through advances in technology, and it's amazing. But learners of all ages are building their media understanding with multimedia applications. They are being able to express themselves through various software and transfer visual images through different platforms. And just media literacy in general, it's defined as the center by the Center for Media Literacy as the ability to access, analyze, create, and participate in media content. We try to, as instructors, that we form our pedagogy around the implementation of multimedia, but they also, we need to make sure that we are effectively determining whether or not our students are gaining the knowledge that we intended. When taking a student-centered approach through learning various authentic learning experiences, it's more ideal to use an authentic assessment of products, not just formalized or standardized approaches. Now there's a place for those, but right now we want to focus more on being able to incorporate different tasks that will support creativity and innovation. So looking at performance-based tasks, they are wonderful for having students become critical thinkers, allowing them to expand their creative thought process and approach to doing things. They can be innovative with how they want to display something or how they want to manipulate the project just in general. They can become problem solvers, and they can transfer the information instead of just displaying it or repeating it to us. And it ultimately shows that they can present the content in different ways, in different mediums. So one of the difficulties with performance-based tasks from an instructor's perspective is that typical evaluations don't necessarily properly assess student development of content. So when we're looking at standard evaluations, they don't offer very much wiggle room. They don't encourage students to step outside of the box. Instead, we're literally checking a box. And again, there is a place for those assessments, but when we're looking at authentic experiences and we're looking at performance tasks, we want to be able to encourage creativity and innovation. So that's the question that I'm just posing, that how as instructors can we properly assess develop student content that will encourage creativity and innovation. So we're going to look at a few opportunities. We're going to look at a few ways that we can assess. We will be looking at some research supportive studies and how they implemented these. And we're also going to go back to the basics right now and study some essential frameworks, because we need to understand what it truly means to be doing authentic learning. So just creative and innovative opportunities, they follow in line with a framework. So there's two frameworks that we're going to be looking at, and that is Adidas's 70-20-10 framework, and the understanding by design framework, which is something we also utilize often. So again, this is the background on the importance of understanding multimedia-based, performance-based tasks and the learning experience in general. So 70% of learning is experienced on the job through performance tasks. Now, this should not be surprising at all. When we are performing, when we are doing, when we are going about activities, we can glean so much knowledge. Our cognition becomes so much deeper that it almost becomes second nature to us. So I want us to just pause for just a second, and I want you to just self-reflect. Think of all of the tasks that you have done up until this point of your day. Did you have to operate any smart devices? Did you have to adjust the thermostat in your house? Did you have to make a pot of coffee? My coffee maker had to be replaced recently, and there was quite a learning curve to understand my new one. So now that I've performed the task multiple times, and I had to do multiple in order to make sure it was a good cup of coffee, I understand it now. So just being able to perform those tasks multiple times also reiterated my level of understanding. Did you have to send any emails? Did you have to type in any spreadsheets? Do any evaluating of student tasks? You know, the tasks that we do on day to day, not only is it consistent, but and not only do we learn from those experiences, they pretty much become something that we understand so completely that we can do it forwards, backwards, and upside down. So again, offering these type of experiences for our students is significantly more ideal. Now, 20% of learning occurs through social interactions. Now, these individuals, they're all smiling, they're in a work setting, and it's very obvious that this was staged for a stock photo, but it's true. When we can have social interactions, our mind just works in a different way sometimes. So if we were in person, if we didn't have to be in this virtual training, then we would be interacting. We would be having a conversation. We would raise our hands, we would interject, someone would pose a question, someone would elaborate on a scenario perhaps, or speak of something that they have used successfully in the past, or even cracked a joke. We would have been able to think back through that social interaction and probably remember exactly what we were speaking of. So again, 20% of learning occurs through social interactions. And that leaves 10%. Now, 10% is not a large percentage by any means. So looking at this, 10% of learning is achieved through coursework. It's just, that is very disappointing as an educator, because that's what we ask our students to do all the time. And I guess, again, it shouldn't be a shocker that when we go through these assignments and tasks and course studies with our students, and they just give you that blank stare and, that shrug of the shoulders that, how did you not learn that? We've been over it. Well, let's look at this. Adidas was correct. Only about 10% of our learning is achieved through coursework. So this reinforces the understanding that we need to have our students performing tasks and not just sitting there completing assignments, the typical assignment. So we need to just, again, step out of our comfort zone, and we need to have our students doing. Bloom's taxonomy. This is going to bring it full circle for us. We have gone over this multiple times. We are very, very familiar with Bloom's taxonomy and the stepping stones of cognition through a classification process of students obtaining knowledge through remembering, understanding, as they apply, evaluate, and create. Creation being the highest level solidifies the relationship between knowledge and the importance of producing performance-based tasks. It's those tasks that they are applying the information, that they are evaluating their own thought process and how they're going to manipulate, how they're going to process, how they're going to develop the content in whatever manner is the case, whatever medium is chosen, and create. When you can create something and when you can back it up, it becomes extremely meaningful and rich. And that's what we want for our students. We want them to be able to be proud of their work and look back and reflect and not only have fun memories, but we just want them to recall the experience. Now, the Understanding by Design framework, it focuses primarily on the instructional design of resources and classroom experiences because the instructor basically begins on the end. They reflect on the end. So you are taking and you are looking at your goals, your objectives, and how they line up with the assessment of choosing, making sure that everything you are doing, all of the content is aligned fully. So when multimedia methods are selected, it's going to foster a greater understanding of the tasks in a manner that just fully aligns with the evaluations. And when we're applying performance-based tasks with this approach, just instructors are able to support greater cognition of the students, that we can encourage learners to not only apply, but again, to evaluate and create from their prerequisite knowledge, what they already understand. And then through that process, they're going to be evaluating, they're going to modify, they're going to adjust, they're going to reflect as they go. And then ultimately, they will be creating content-rich projects. The application is just extremely important. Again, we're going to consistently talk about the process is just as important as the final product. So this type of framework is going to be essential when innovation is encouraged. We want all learning to be relevant, and we want to be able to expand on their current levels of understanding. And when we ask them to apply this type of information, it's just going to continue to expand. We need to give them that space and that opportunity to do so. And when we ask our students to be creative, and we as instructional designers, you set that starting line, and they are the ones that are going to navigate all the way to the finish line. And as I displayed on this image, the sky's the limit, that the students, when they're granted the freedom to apply through these performance-based tasks, that they're only going to be limited by their own creativity, which is ideal. We want them to go as far as they can and be as innovative as appropriate. So authentic learning experiences, the fact that technology's tools are readily available and often mobile through our phones and take along laptops and tablets and iPads, they facilitate the pedagogies that are removing the teacher from being the center of the content and the constant direction of our choosing, and it enables students to become the center of the learning. There's ultimately just a shift from the teacher to the student-centered approach, and in some instances, students can actually direct the content. We can have them choose the context of the experience and just apply creative approaches to their learning, and they can become in charge of displaying their level of understanding through any type of authentic learning experience. Now, what's the benefit of this? Why do we want to support this? Why do we want to take a step back? And in general, it's authentic. This is what they're going to be doing when they're adults, when they are out in the real world, when they are in their careers. This is how we need to support them. Real life experiences. Not everything is going to be sitting down filling out a worksheet. In real life, that's just not always applicable. And for many careers and fields of study, it's just not the case. And when we give them the freedom that they're needing, they're going to become a bit more self-driven. They're going to feel motivated and creativity. They want to be able to do something. So it's our job to just provide encouragement and to be there as a guide and be there as supportive. So just by transferring the design of the learning experience and allowing students to have that freedom to select and develop their own project or task, just the entire process produces creativity and the self-direction that they need to be taking. And it's just our job to be supportive, to watch as they go. So we should be allowing the students to select the task when possible. And it can even allow us to negotiate just the assessment opportunities. With a rubric, how many components should we be looking for? Will there be a opportunity for them to self-analyze, for them to maybe defend their choices and reiterate why they went through that process, and maybe to expand if we just don't quite understand the outcome. So just giving them the opportunity to display their level of understanding and present their created material, there can be some wiggle room with the evaluation process. Learning experiences not only become rich and meaningful, but they are also in the environment where everything is going to be supported and encouraged. And by exploring those assessment options, both the instructor and the students become invested with the experience, just even before the performance begins. So some examples. There's projects, debates, performances, and portfolios. So the education system isn't just set up for K-12. This is also for adult learners, and even those just not even in a traditional setting, not just public education, but charter, homeschools, private learning academies, for projects. Just an example might be a video creation or some type of display of innovation where they design something that solves a problem, a dilemma. A PowerPoint, maybe they conduct a poll of the class or their school, and they display an analysis of maybe the current levels or what the desired outcome might be. A debate, it would be ideal if they conducted as much research as possible, develop some talking points, and could perhaps have a Zoom meeting where they actually had a debate and conversed with a partner at a different school or at a different state in a different country. Performance, any type of artistic display, video, musical production, any way that they can incorporate movement, any way that they can incorporate any type of multimedia application where it's just displaying something. And a portfolio, it would be ideal to have a link where they had multiple products that they've created. And again, when we're using so much of the web-based designs, we need to continue to use best practices and make sure that our students are in a safe environment. But there are several opportunities out there, and we need to look through them. So shifting our focus onto potential assessment opportunities, as evidence with the previous learning frameworks, the learning process is often just as important as the final product when it comes to a student-centered, authentic experience with multimedia tools. Lowell and Moore created the 6 C's, where we are able to use collaboration, communication, cross-cultural competencies, citizenship, critical thinking, and creativity is behind the corner. I apologize. When media application is applied through those 6 C's, the students have the opportunity to develop life skills and real world skills. The experiences that they build are meaningful and memorable, and they just promote greater cognition. While these outcomes of these endeavors they show their understanding of the content, it would also just be as important through the evaluation where we're really looking and encouraging their creativity and innovation just by not setting so many restrictions for their expression. And by just providing a framework of criteria, the instruction can ensure that the content is present, while the final product also provides the learners with just a broader opportunity to reflect their current level of knowledge. So, formative assessments are completed at the end of a unit, at the end of a course or a certain study, or at the end of the year. In K-12 public school systems, it's typically called the end of grade testing, just big formalized standard testing at the end of the year. And, often standardized, and the most popular, most common approaches are to have multiple choice questions, to have matching, true and false, short answer responses, and even a written exam prompt where they have to meet certain criteria. But with a summative assessment, this is implemented throughout, and these are conducted by any method of the instructor. So these could include observational surveys, exit tickets, open-ended responses through a written or a verbal discussion, worksheets, being able to gauge if they are actively participating. And this again might go back to observational surveys and note-taking, and performance-based tasks, which is what we are significantly in support of. Now, performance-based tasks and other authentic learning experiences, they could be utilized throughout the learning unit in a summative capacity, but they can also become formative assessments. And these are just basically designated by the instructor. And again, rubrics and frameworks, this is when they come to play. This is when they are the most crucial when we're implementing these tasks. So by assessing student-created media pieces, it's going to require the instructor to evaluate differently, and for us to be more flexible with our perspective and our premise. The type of media selected should be capable of effectively displaying the acquired knowledge and whatever skills they are showing us, however they've developed their task. And criteria-based rubrics are going to ensure that the students are providing that they are provided with a framework, that they are able to see and understand the expectations. But, and I reiterate the fact that these need to be flexible and broad in nature so that they can maintain a level of creative freedom. A rubric can be viewed as a guide for the students to demonstrate their learning, as well as the assessment piece that specifies a level of performance that the learners need to master a competency or a set of competencies. So we can think, who is really evaluating their task? There are opportunities where an audience can perform an evaluation, or a peer evaluation might be utilized just to gauge the level of understanding and to mastery. But self-reflection can also take place with these competency criteria. And similarly, with the planning and the organization of their performance-based tasks, it could be viewed throughout as an individual analysis. Their predetermined criteria is known from the beginning, but the entire development and creative process is their responsibility, which can show that their self-reflection and any type of self-correcting would be naturally occurring throughout the process. And ultimately, the teachers are the evaluators. However, there should be some support and the ability to include the student, even if it's a group assignment, including an evaluation aspect in the rubric where the students are able to supply their input. Now, there is an undeniable link between learning environments and the audience and the instructional content or the competencies and evaluation. The process of instruction is not linear. Instead, it is a more fluid approach because each aspect impacts the other. Just by prompting adjustments and modifications throughout the experience, just whenever necessary. So the instructional content is just as important to the development and the consideration of evaluations, but the learning environment and the audience can also directly impact the instructional approach. So, which in turn will affect and impact the evaluation. So everything kind of links together. And when authentic experiences, the projects are assigned by the instructor, it needs to be clear, the clear purpose of the expectations before they begin. All right, now we are going to spend some time looking at some supportive studies. So I have 4 different research articles that support and show alignment with the importance of implementing multimedia performance-based tasks, and definitely in ways to foster creativity. So in this first one, Ross, Kerwood, and Bell conducted an experiment in 2020, and it was assessing multimedia tasks. So they were looking at ways to determine how they can assess using a framework that would go over creativity, criticality, and the holistic nature of assignments without being too restrictive. Their study followed a qualitative design as they tasked undergraduate participants for completing their full course term. So they had already done their course, and this was their formative assessment at the end. And they were tasked with the opportunity to create a 3-minute video, informative video of Australian culture. And the research question within this article, it posed within its study that it revolved around assessment criteria, expectations, and the grading process in general. So the initial push was just due to struggles in previous courses where the students and the instructors, they felt that they weren't analyzing appropriately. They weren't evaluating as in a manner that was very supportive of the students. They were looking from one student to the other instead of looking at the individual assignment, the individual product produced. And they found that there were too many rigid restrictions, and the students were being hindered through the creative process. So a multimedia assignment should be promoted as an innovative design through a selected presentation method of the learner's choosing. And it would be encouraged to have collaboration within a small group, and it should encompass their knowledge on the subject, but also foster creativity in whatever manner they choose to display. These authors, they decided that they should include a broad rubric where they were looking at the performance task to include the cinematic elements, the narratives, relative content, what was actually in the film, and they offered an opportunity for a student analysis and reflection. And this was where their students were interviewed. This was showing a reflective aspect, which was very, very important, and showed student favor in the end. The students were very, very supportive of this because they felt like they had some input in the creation as well as the evaluation, which is beneficial. So it showed that there was such a positive relationship with the student satisfaction level with the task and the grading process that the four elements of the multimodal framework, they were able to gauge, they were able to look at the criticality, the cultivating of the creativity of the students, the holism, and they were able to value modality throughout. And the assessment portion of this was just the creative expression in mind. And it was not only facilitating their creativity, but encouraged them to experience different processes as they went. Now, next study was by Smith in 2017, and it was digital portfolios. So Smith explored the benefits of developing a rubric that would clearly convey expectations and to measure student work in digital portfolios. And he used a qualitative design, and they analyzed separate areas of the learning outcomes for seniors, again, in an undergraduate study. They were able to compare different case studies, which, they strive to determine a method that would evaluate performance-based tasks and would kind of reduce student uncertainty of which direction they should be taking just by providing that freedom of creativity and development. But they were also vocalizing some critical performance expectations. So here we are again, setting the baseline of what we expect to see from the students, and then you let go. You let them create and perform their tasks independently or collaboratively, but without so much rigid structure. And this just ensures some more flexibility. So the clear expectations are what's going to measure the work. And the results from the author's study, it explained the importance as they assessed 3 different areas with at least a 6-level scale. Again, this is for adult learners, but this could also be modified to a lower level. And just again, true objectivity can't be achieved if you were evaluating just solely based on creativity. Instead, that there should be a benchmark for quality content, but while also appropriate for the assessment and how it aligns. So the rubric removes the bias. It removes comparing between the others. It removes the uncertainty. So, it added flexibility by looking at the writing quality, by mediating the performance and the production, making sure that every aspect was in there, but they didn't analyze, they didn't, pinpoint what had to be there. And the web development and design, just the evaluation in itself, clear expectations and then let them go. So 3D innovation was studied by Shin and Park in 2019. And I really enjoyed this study. If you guys are able to take time, look at the reference page, and I would try to find all 4 of the research articles, but this one I really enjoyed. It's a performance-based task where the students were able to have this innovative opportunity to manipulate a procedural manipulative simulation experience where the design of it was split into 2 phases. And they were to create, manipulate, design a Japanese crystal puzzle. And they started out through a simulation. And again, it was split in between two different phases where creative designs were not just structured or prompted. It was only for a portion of the time. So in the beginning, the first phase, they were looking at 3D dynamic animation where the design was being manipulated for them. Then they were able to manipulate it. became evident that it was a bit too stimulating. So in the second part, the second phase, the groups were able to see the three-dimensional animation, but there were also static images. So they had something for a comparison. And without being able to view any additional or previously viewed support videos throughout the simulation, the participants were asked to develop and manipulate the blocks into their final crystal shape display. They were provided with ample time to view the instructional portion of the resources. And there were some questions posed on how their learning possibilities and the visual stimulations itself were impacting them. But there were several references to the cognitive load theory, and the learners throughout their performance were assessed based on whatever methods they were showing, their created designs and completed tasks. So, while the research itself was designated to determine the most appropriate and beneficial ways that the individuals were able to comprehend visual stimulation with procedural manipulative tasks, and how they could be applied, it also focused on the impact of multimedia assignments that they can have on either fostering or hindering an individual's innovative process. So, the study indicated that when the learners had the freedom to manipulate and design the visual content independently, that their cognition was significantly higher, and their scaffolded approaches to go to the next level through the simulation, through the tasks, that they were completed at a faster rate. So the completion of the task was not only the evaluated aspect of the development process, but as a reflective account of the experience, that they were able to combine the willingness of the learners to experiment creatively and to manipulate just other different unintended designs. And they were able to recall the previously known visual content to what they were prompted to do. They were able to go back and complete it as was designed. Now, again, these studies are for higher level learners, but this could very, very easily be shifted into a primary grade. One example might be to build a zoo. Have your students break them up into small groups and give each group a different type of animal. Ask them to research that animal, come up with what type of space they need, what type of environment they would thrive in. And again, ask them to build a zoo. Give them, three-dimensional objects where they can create a pen, where they can create the perimeter and the area within that animal would need to thrive in a zoo, in an enclosed environment. So you could have then take images of that and combine it into a presentation where each animal is studied, and you are able to see and gain the perspectives of the students and allow them to create the three-dimensional product in itself. So not only do they get to understand the experience themselves, but they get to learn from the others as it's combined. Just an example. Doesn't have to be complex by any means. And the next one, we have web-based multimedia assessments. And this is from a study in 2019, which was conducted in Taiwan. This goes over science laboratory tasks, and it's going to assess conceptual and experimental knowledge. So middle schoolers experienced either a traditional typical lecture style instruction where the teacher is showing them what they will be doing, teaching them about the experiment, demonstrating up in front of everybody. And the other group was a web-based learning assessment portion where students were, it was infused with multimedia throughout. So they were able to apply as they went. They were able to conduct mini assessments where they were able to complete the task. And it was a different approach to find the end, to compare a simple lecture style versus a performance. And from what we know already, performance, being able to perform, is going to build a greater cognition, which it was. The students' actions were observed, and their completion of the experiments were reviewed, but they were also interviewed as a follow-up type of assessment, just to see what their recall was. The assessment portion in the web-based assessment, multimedia assessment, was able to perform the process through the operation, having them respond, and providing them some clarifying feedback if they weren't completing things as they needed to. And with the actual experiment in the laboratory, which everyone completed after their learning approach, there were no interactions between the instructors as they experimented with their laboratory tasks. And this allowed them to perform just based on their recall and gained knowledge through the process. And it was just obviously going to be determined that higher conceptual knowledge and experimental knowledge was attributed to the interactivity with the multimedia tool, because it provided assessment and a feedback performance portion of their learning. And the students had the freedom to create, to complete the performance-based tasks, the physical tasks, as they felt necessary, and were able to conduct multiple attempts until there was an accurate completion. So during the web-based instruction portion, they were able to also incorrectly complete the steps and then correct based on whatever support was provided for them. So, just the practice in general, allowing them to make errors and to make those self-corrections, it supports the real life experience of learners, because we need to prepare them to adapt the things that they encounter. Whenever they encounter obstacles with future tasks, it's going to happen. So we need to prepare them on ways to adapt and modify independently. And again, that's where the performance and the task in general comes in. All right, so we are to the conclusion portion of our training. So multimedia provides infinite opportunities to gain cognition across multiple subject areas and grade levels. There's really no limitation. So performance-based tasks that incorporate multimedia will just magnify the potential for gaining knowledge and higher cognitive levels whenever they use their knowledge to apply, evaluate, and create relative content. They encourage students to display their level of understanding while giving them the freedom to express themselves through creative and innovative practices. And these types of authentic learning experiences can be utilized as either summative or formative evaluations, just making the student-centered approach just more meaningful and memorable. Okay, and it's just important that we continue to encourage that level of freedom and encourage the innovative practices. And we're the facilitators. We are the instructors that need to allow the student learning experiences to have the process. We need to provide a broad rubric criterion where we have clear expectations, where we set the baseline, but we let them go, that we are only there to foster and support and to reel them in if they get off task. But ultimately, we are wanting to allow them to develop some creativity with whatever approach they're working towards. I appreciate your attendance. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment, to reach out to me. You can post them through this video, or you can send them to me personally. Thank you.